Good afternoon, fellow Googlers, and those of you who are watching this out on YouTube. I'm Alan Davidson. I head Google's Washington, D.C. Public Policy Group, and I'm delighted to be here today to introduce our guest today, the Speaker of the House of Representatives, Nancy Pelosi. Just by way of a quick short story, when shortly after the Speaker had become the Speaker, we did our first, executive visit with her after she had become Speaker. And at one point, she sort of went off on telling this story about how she had done a political event in Second Life. And she told us a little about the difficulty of choosing her avatar in Second Life, which is, if you're a political person, I guess, fraught with peril. And at one point at the end, Eric Schmidt, who's our CEO, was there, said, you know, this is really interesting, but can I just say, how cool is it that we have a Speaker of the House who knows what an avatar is? I'll leave it to Eric to talk a little about the Speaker's background. He's known her for a long time. Her story is compelling and historic, from moving to the Bay Area to raise her 5 children to becoming the congressional representative for the 8th District in California, representing most of San Francisco, to becoming minority leader for the Democratic Party in 2002, and ultimately in 2007 becoming the Speaker of the House of Representatives, the first woman and the first Californian to do that. Throughout it all, she has been a champion on many issues, a leader on energy, healthcare, protecting workers. She's also been a real champion of the tech community, and her innovation agenda, promoting science and engineering education, money for research and development, patent reform, sensible immigration policies that work for the high-tech community. She's really been there for our community. She was an early proponent of network neutrality. And she continues to fight for more broadband deployment and open access to the internet. People who've heard me at Google talk about our congressional delegation have heard me say we are really blessed with having a congressional delegation that really understands the importance of the internet and the power of the internet. Anna Eshoo, our congresswoman, is here with us today. Zoe Lofgren, who's also part of the Bay Area congressional delegation. They are real leaders in understanding these issues, but we are really fortunate to have as a representative in our Bay Area delegation and a leader of this country, our guest today. So please join me in welcoming our CEO, Eric Schmidt, and the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi.
Well, Madam Speaker, welcome to Google.
My pleasure to be here.
You know, the Speaker is the third in line to the presidency.
Second.
The current president, the vice president, and Mrs. Pelosi. She grew up in Baltimore in a political family. Worked in the California Democratic Party as an organizer.
No, as a chair.
As a chair, became chair. And then has served us extraordinarily well over the last 20 years, rising to the leader in 2002. And at the time, there was a tremendous amount of, you know, is she ready, is she capable, and so forth. And her ability to operate politically was proven at the level of the state of the art that we've never really seen before, when she is widely seen as having engineered a shift in power in the House of extraordinary proportions, using some very, very, very clever approaches in 2006. And as a result, she became the Speaker in early 2007. What I thought we could do is get right to work and ask you a little bit about the innovation agenda that you've been working on for a couple of years, and it's very impressive. So go ahead.
Thank you, Eric. Just as you're speaking, I'm looking out at these wonderful young faces and seeing the faces of the future, not only in age, but in what you are doing. I want you to know that Eric Schmidt is recognized throughout the country and certainly in Washington, D.C., as a visionary for that future. a person of great intellect, talent.
Speaker, this is an interview with you, not with me.
No, but I want you to know that, because he's a very special person. And of course, we all are completely dazzled by Sergey Brin and Larry Page for their brilliance and taking us to a new place, Larry, Sergey, and Eric Schmidt, in our democracy. I will talk about the innovation agenda because it's something I'm very proud of and was put together under the leadership of Anna Eshoo, Congresswoman Anna Eshoo, Congresswoman Zoe Lofgren, and Congressman George Miller. And I'll go into it in a moment. But first, I just want to say this about how it fits into our country and our country's history. 200 years ago, when our country was young and new, it took as a message could travel only as fast as a horse could gallop or a ship could sail. That's how long it would take. So anybody who had information was king or queen, largely king at that time, and it was empowering. Now imagine 200 years later, even over the course of time with the telegraph and the rest, where a message could be conveyed. That was one thing. Now, data, just all the information in the world that exists can empower a person, can liberate people, and level the playing field in such an important way. And no one, no organization, no people has done more to make that strengthening of our democracy, empowerment of the people more successful than those of you at Google. So thank you for your leadership in strengthening our democracy as you advance the technology. Our founders were disruptors. They were disruptors. That nobody in the history of the world had decided they were going to found a new country founded on a new principle that all people were created equal. And they had so much confidence in what they were doing that they said it was going to be for the ages. But they disrupted the status quo. And that's exactly what you are doing. You're disrupting in a very positive and magnificent way the status quo. I don't know what else is out there to see, but I know you do, and we all look forward to it. So again, thank you for being traditional Americans and being such disruptors that you are, and also empowering the American people in that way. And with our innovation agenda, we wanted to continue those possibilities, make them available to all people. And so a few years ago, Anna Eshoo, Zoe Lofgren, and George Miller decided to put together teams of people all over the country, starting at Stanford University. By the time we got to MIT, they said, why didn't you start here? And we said, well, we started where it all began, in Silicon Valley. And it's our commitment to competitiveness, to keep America #1. So a strong component of that sprang from our discussions all over the country, beginning at Stanford, was a strong commitment to education, and with the knowledge that we had to invest in educating many more scientists, engineers, people, mathematicians, and the rest, if we were going to be competitive in the world economy. And fundamental to that was to strengthen K through 12, our whole education system. Also, it has a strong component of research and development in it, investments in research and development, which we have not realized just yet, but we will very, very soon. I mean, we have passed the legislation. We don't have the funding that we need to match our goal of making doubling the budget of all of the National Science Foundation, other entities on the federal level that invest in science and technology and that research. It has a strong component of energy independence because that is a competitiveness issue. And it is, if you had one issue that was going to be the challenge to our generation, and any place in it that you are, that you had to change the energy policy, eliminate our dependence on foreign oil, reduce our dependence on fossil fuels, have a renewable electricity standard, well, all of the things which we can go into more detail if you wish. But changing the energy policy was essential to an innovation agenda. And a recognition that small businesses were essential. The success of small businesses were essential to the creation of jobs, of ideas, of taking an idea to the marketplace, improving the lives of the American people. And also to make sure that broadband was available to every person in America. We're not there yet, but we will be. And when it is, just imagine the liberation it will be for many more people who will have access to Google on in real time, all the time, high speed, always on, and all of the other advantages of having broadband and what that will do for everything, for commerce, for healthcare, you name it, education, for everything in our society. So this is our, if I were to say, what are the four words that would describe our domestic agenda when January comes and, God willing, we have a president who subscribes to this, the four words that would describe our domestic agenda are science, 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 and science.
Can we just pause? Isn't that incredible?
For all of the reasons that you know.
Again, this is like the Avatar moment. The Speaker of the House is talking about science?
Well, in Washington now, science and faith, take your pick. And so we keep saying, no, science is the answer to our prayers. And but if you're going to have universal access to quality health care, you need a strong investment in science, not just the life sciences, but also the hard science, the physical sciences, so that we have the technology that will make this healthcare or good health of Americans reality. Science is the answer for eliminating our dependence on foreign oil, for our innovation agenda. Instead of arguing about trade, let's just educate, innovate, compete, and prevail. But science and technology are essential to that, and of course to the innovation agenda, which is central to everything that we do. And I'll talk more about it if you want me to, but I'm very eager to hear what some of your questions are, and certainly Eric's.
So before we get down to sort of policy questions, one more personal question. You are the most powerful woman in the United States. You, all right, pretty neat. You grew up at a time when that may not have been such an obvious achievement that was achievable. You rose through the ranks. Can you talk about what it's like to go through all of that, where we are now, what you've seen, and what you think the future holds for both diversity, the rise of women and minorities and so forth, and sort of the nature of how our political system is changing because of people like yourself and your leadership?
Well, I appreciate that question, Eric. I actually wrote a book about it because so many people ask me over and over again, how did you go from the kitchen to the Congress? How did you go from being a housewife to the House Speaker?
But by the way, I read that your strategy is to use tough mom love with the House, with 5 kids.
Well, you know, that sometimes when my colleagues, the microphone doesn't work as well as I want it to, I'll tell them, shall I resort to my mother of 5 voice? That's a little scary to them sometimes. But the need for women and minorities to be, I met Elizabeth Stanton here, Ellie Stanton, a little girl who showed me how she was going to find her family's voting place on election day. And she's named for Elizabeth Cady Stanton. And that's such a beautiful thing, one of the suffragettes without whom none of us in politics would have reached any of the heights that we have. And I would tell her and you this story. The first time I went to the White House as a member of the House leadership, I went and I wasn't intimidated in any way because I had been to the White House many times as an Intelligence Committee member, as a member of the Appropriations Committee. And so when I went into the room and the door closed behind me, it was just President Bush and the Vice President and the leadership of the House and Senate, Democrats and Republicans, no more than 8 or 9 people at the table, just the top leadership. And the President welcomed me very graciously as a new member of the leadership. When I sat in my chair, I realized that this was unlike any meeting I had attended at the White House. In fact, it was unlike any meeting that any woman had ever attended at the White House. Because there I was at the table, not with my presence there derived from the President's appointment or invitation or what, but there because of the fact that I represented the House Democrats by their choice. But anyway, the point being that while I'm sitting there and the President's being gracious in his opening remarks, I could feel very closed in in my seat and was packed and jammed on that chair. It was as if Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Susan B. Anthony and Alice Paul and you name it, had all the people had worked so hard for women to have a rightful place in politics, government, academic world, business, you name it. We're all in that chair with me. And as we were all sitting there together, I could hear them say, "At last, we have a seat at the table."
Okay.
And then they were gone. And I realized what I knew, but it drove home further the response, the debt of gratitude we all, and Eshu and I and Zoe and others, owe to all of these women who went before. We stand on their shoulders because they knew it was important a long time ago when it took a great deal more courage to go out there and ride the range and spread the word. About 160 years ago, this is when that was going on. And so now, of course, it drives home the responsibility that we have to the next generation of leaders, that whether they're little girls or generations of leaders coming from one field to the next or from the kitchen to wherever. And it is so necessary that we have this diversity, whether it's diversity about including many more women or diversity that I see in this room of people representing every nationality, ethnic group, religion, whatever, from around the world. Because at that table, the discussion is enriched the more diversity you have there. You know that in the work that you do,
yes,
how blessed you are. But our country needs that. And so in my book, Know Your Power, I say to women, know your power, know how needed you are. And again, that extends, as Eric wisely said, to other diversity as well. This is a great country because it has, over the generations, from those early disruptors, recognized that our future would only be better if every generation took the responsibility to make the future better for the next. And every immigrant group that has come to America has come with the determination to make the future better for their families and therefore for America. So they've all, as they have come to this day, made America more American by subscribing to the optimism, the determination, the courage of this great country. And that's why we are such a great country, and that's why I know in a little while that the best is yet to come.
Let's talk a little bit about policy. And as I understand it, Congress is at the moment out of session. Everyone's running for office. The election's November 4th. And after you're all reelected, and you in particular reelected, and you come back as Speaker, will you have a so-called lame duck session, a session between the November 4th and January 20th? And if so, what will you do during that session?
Well, we're trying to negotiate right now with the president is whether he would support a recovery package, a Main Street recovery package, a stimulus package that is about the future, that builds the infrastructure, and Anna Eshu has been in the lead on this, builds the infrastructure of America, not just talking about roads and bridges and mass transit, that's important, but also broadband across America, to rebuild the grid, to make it a smart grid so that with all that we're investing in wind and solar and biofuels, et cetera, that we have a grid to transmit it. It's no use doing it unless you can transmit it. And that we have a commitment to innovation in this pack. You hear people on TV say, oh, they want to have an infrastructure package like a public works package from the 30s. And we're saying, no, we'll have some public works in there because the country needs that. But this is about a stimulus for the future. And it comes at a perfect time. Now, the president isn't quite there yet, and we're trying to persuade him that this will create good-paying jobs in America, grow the economy in a way that recognizes the green recovery of America, and addressed to Main Street. And it is, so that's the negotiation I'm having with him now.
Do you literally just sort of call him up and say,
Yeah, I do.
like, what have you been doing lately?
Number 3 calling. Number 1, it's number 3.
So you call up and you say, look, I'm willing to bring Congress back.
For a reason.
But only if you behave rationally.
Well, no, I don't quite say it that way.
Sorry.
Eric Schmidt can get away with that.
No, what do you actually say?
Say, Mr. President, clearly, but see, well, you have to create the environment. So how we created the environment was to invite the chairman of the Fed to testify in Congress on Monday. He did before our budget committee. And when he testified, he said that the economy needed a strong stimulus, which I don't know if he would have just volunteered to come to say that, but since he was invited, he spoke truth to the budget committee. So when the chairman of the Fed is saying we need a stimulus package, because if we don't, the economy will get worse. And it can get so bad that it becomes even much more difficult to dig out of. So I called him and said, Chairman Bernanke yesterday said that we need the stimulus package. We've already passed it in the House. But since we did the end of September, I think there's need for a bigger package. And he said, well, do you want to talk about the particulars of it? Is that why you're calling? I said, well, no, I want to talk about how we proceed to have bipartisan support for a substantial package that does what it needs to do, grow the economy, create good paying jobs in the future in a way that is a green recovery geared toward Main Street and is fiscally sound. Where do we go from here? Because I know if I just told him what we wanted to do in the package, he'd probably say, I don't want to do that. So we framed it in terms of how we will continue the negotiation. Now, if we come to terms, we'll call, the chair has the power to call Congress back in session to pass such legislation, which really is necessary. And I know that, God willing, the results next Tuesday, being what I hope they are, we'll be able to do all of this in January. But I don't think we can wait that long. It's just getting deeper and deeper into a downturn, a recession, and we really need to do something as soon as possible, which would be in the next 2 weeks.
So there are two separate things going on. There's obviously this question of stimulus package, which that you're leading the discussion about, and I certainly agree with your notion that if we're going to pump all this money into the economy, we might as well get some energy independent, get some other benefits besides just short-term stimulus. I'd like to go back a month earlier to the crisis as it unfolded. So now this is the financial crisis. Yeah. And in the litany of complaints that I have about the current government, I think the decision by the secretary to offer essentially a bill that was 3 pages long with very large type and a small number of words on it, which had $700 billion and no complete immunity and no oversight, was one of the larger errors made in government. You saw that, you stopped it. Can you describe that sequence of events? First, the initial proposal, then the modifications that you drove, then the historic vote, which did not pass, and then 4 days later, some additional adjustments and a pretty strong win.
You really want to know about this?
Absolutely. This is, I
promise
think,
not to tell anybody what I'm going to tell you now.
But part of it is because, as I understand the way our political system works, you really do, as Speaker, have to get everybody on the same page, establish the facts, and you have the power of investigations and sort of bringing light to sort of move people forward. How did you pull that off?
Well, I want to be clear, I'm not crazy about the package that finally passed. I think we could have still done better, but it's the package that could be signed, which is always an important distinction to make. Well, I'll tell you, again, this is sort of the day-to-day of it. About 5 weeks ago, we were having a meeting of the Democratic leadership in my office, and I said, I haven't heard from Secretary Paulson. He usually briefs me on the markets. And in the period of time that I hadn't heard from him was Lehman Brothers, Merrill Lynch, and AIG. And I said, this looks pretty chaotic because there are 3 challenges, 3 different approaches, what's going on here, and we possibly need to do something about this. So it was by then 3 o'clock in the afternoon. It's important to know the time. It was 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and I called the secretary, and I said, Hank, we call now, it's Hank and Ben, just for shorthand. Hank, I mean, thank God their names are not like John or something like that, and we'd have to use their full name. Hank, we haven't heard from you, what's going on? It looks chaotic to us. I need you to come tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. to brief the House Democrats on what's happening in the markets. Does that time work for you? If so, I'm going to call Ben and ask Ben to be there too to see how he sees the economy. And do you know what he said? He said, Nancy, we can't wait that long.
Really?
9 o'clock the next morning. We can't wait that long. And I said, well, it's 3 o'clock in the afternoon. We can't wait until 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. Come right now, come right over. Well, why haven't you called us? Why haven't you called us if this thing is, well, they really weren't really ready to go public with what they were doing. And they really weren't ready to reveal it to Congress. But since I called, then okay. So they come at 7 o'clock at night, and they tell us that the economy is in the worst, the most dismal description that you will ever want to hear. And what was pretty sobering about it, by then it was not just the House Democrats, by the way, it was House, Senate, Democrats and Republicans, the full leadership of the Congress in my office. And they took us to the depths of hell with this description of the economy. And then Ben Bernanke, who was an expert on the Great Depression, informed us that essentially that if we didn't act immediately, there might not be an economy by Monday. Now, mind you, this is 7 o'clock at night, 3 o'clock, 5 to 3, we hadn't heard from them yet. So you said you wanted to
really
go
sort of
day
a
to
bad
day.
day for you. You
Yeah.
had no idea it was going to happen.
But they wouldn't tell us how much it would cost, and they insisted that their approach was going to be to buy the toxic paper. Tell me if there's more on the subject than you want to know. To buy the toxic paper, residential and commercial paper, to, as they said, this economy is having a heart attack, and we must unclog the arteries. And we buy this toxic paper, it's going to unclog the arteries. How are you going to do it? Blah, blah, blah. We don't know it, this and that. And they described this as their break the glass proposal. That's something they had like in a drawer in case of this turn of events occurred, which did, then this is, as in a fire, break the glass. I said, well, and we've been doing all this research, and this is the model that will work. Toxic paper, buy it up, make these institutions healthier. So we said, well, we've been doing all this research, and they said, well, we were preparing it for the next president. They knew something could be coming, and it could be very serious, that you would want to break the glass, but they were not prepared to tell us until we called and said what's doing. Now, in that room that night, Democrats and Republicans, it was very bipartisan, it wasn't a partisan occasion, the sentiment was largely that if we're going to make these organizations healthy, we wanted equity. We wanted a preferred position in these newly healthy, unclogged arteries of these financial institutions. No, this is the model. No, this is the model. And we wanted compensation and no golden reform, no golden parachutes. No, can't do that. We wanted said the equity. We wanted congressional oversight. Well, you're going to drive the whole thing down if you have too much of that. And then we wanted a mortgage forbearance on the foreclosure situation. We wanted those 4 things, which actually were what Barack Obama had been talking about.
But didn't you feel that they were putting a gun to your head?
Well, when they said we won't act immediately, we're going to not have an economy by Monday, yeah, it was pretty. It was like we saw the ghost of the Great Depression right there in my office. So in any event, we went out and said, no, about every 5 or 10 minutes, Senator Harry Reid would say, how much is this going to cost? He didn't preface it with, I'm going to ask this question again, and maybe you didn't hear me. How much is this going to cost? Well, no, they would never tell us. So in any event, we didn't know.
$1 billion here, $1 billion there.
Well, we kept saying $200 billion. No, $300 billion. You're getting warmer. You're getting warmer. I said, am I playing with my grandchildren now? Where the secretary and the chairman, we're getting warmer? But that's as far as it will go. Does this restore your confidence in government? Vote on November 4th. So we go out and make a bipartisan commitment that we're going to work together, that Congress will act, the time is of the essence, and that we're going to restore confidence in the markets by working together. But now we still haven't seen a bill. The much heralded bill that Eric referenced. Do I call you Mr. Schmidt here, or do I call you Eric? How do we do it? Eric, okay. I figured no tie, it's Eric, right? So
when was the last time I wore a tie?
I don't know.
It's Google.
They send over this $700 billion, stunning figure, with unbelievable powers accrued to the, assigned to the Secretary of the Treasury, no judicial review, no review by any agency of government. Remember, Anna? No agency of government would have any jurisdiction over reviewing what they did, not the GAO, the CBO, all these accounting agencies. And that all the dollars that would come into the program would be available to the Secretary to use. And we're saying, no, 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 they are for the taxpayer. When we wanted the equity stake, we wanted recoupment. We don't intend to spend $700 billion. We intend to invest $700 billion. We intend to get that back for the taxpayer and perhaps make us, we are now a sovereign wealth fund investing in all of this. But anyway, so the arrangement was that we would go forward, we'd work in a bipartisan way. When we came to agreement, we'd produce 120 votes, they'd produce 100 votes, because my members said, we're not going down this path alone. If we are, we'll write our own bill. But if they want their bill,
oh, I see.
If they want their bill,
participate.
so none of my members wanted to vote for it. So anyway, we honor that. We get 140, they get 65. The bill fails, and they got 65 because their members they are beyond laissez-faire. You know, they true to their beliefs, and you have to give them credit and respect them for that. They don't believe in any government role whatsoever. No regulation, no discipline, no supervision, and when it all comes tumbling down, no intervention. But the taxpayer has to pick up the tab, because you can't not, then our financial institutions fall, and then our economy, well, you know the consequences. So in any event, after that, again, with Barack Obama was really very clear about putting forth to the Democrats equity, oversight, golden parachute, compensation reform, and forbearance on all of that, and was able to help then. We still don't have the 100 votes from the Republicans. I think they got up to 80 or 90, but the Democrats put in enough votes afterward with a much improved bill, but still not where we would write it. But that's what Washington is about. It's about the bill that you can get passed, that can be signed into law. That standard will rise significantly in about 10 days in terms of what we can accomplish. So anyway, then we brought it back and we passed it. And 2 footnotes on that. One is, so that's a Friday. 2 weeks and 1 day after they came into my office, we had a bill signed by the President of the United States for $700 billion. This is remarkable speed for Washington, D.C., and for Congress. Tuesday, that's a Friday. Tuesday, the market went down 700 points. So I called Hank. I said, Hank, the market, what about all this confidence and all the rest? The market went down 700 points. He said, well, I have my ideas about why that happened. He told me, too long to go into unless you ask me. But I said, I'm pleased that the decision has been made to buy the commercial paper, because if you don't do that, the whole economy stops, and that Ben is going to lower the rate, and now that's all good. And he said, and yes, we're going to recapitalize the banks. Now this is what, no, we couldn't possibly do that. It doesn't meet the model and all the rest of that. But of course, the Brits had done it for a couple of days before. Yeah. And so now that was like a newfound idea. When we wrote the bill, I said, you may not want to do this, but we are going to give you the latitude in the bill to do your toxic paper, if you ever figure out how to do that, and also to recapitalize, because we think that's the fastest way to make these institutions healthy. You can do them both. They're not mutually exclusive. So then they did that. And then a few days later, last Friday, I called him. I said, Hank, these bankers are saying they're not going to lend the money. That was really part of the point. They can't, they have to lend the money. People are dying for putting money in circulation, and businesses and banks and other banks who borrow from banks, and that's what banks do. They're supposed to be doing that. But one of the bankers had said, Merrill Lynch, they said they were going to save it until the next quarter, which is next year. And so we said that was unacceptable, and Hank did too. So I know they can't lend out every dollar that they have received, but they must put into circulation the money that the taxpayer is giving them for that purpose, and hopefully that will have an impact on access for small businesses and people. This impact on Main Street, whether it's your owning your home or keeping your business alive, or the value of your pension, the ability for you to send your children to college that you saved up for, it's all gets very, very personal. And sometimes people don't see the connection between Wall Street and Main Street. We wanted to make that clear. And that's why we want to do this next package for the innovation agenda, which is a Main Street recovery package much more directly. So that's
thank you. And thank you for getting $700 billion directed the right way. When thinking about the election, and it looks like current polling would indicate the House of Representatives will gain Democratic members. Current polling indicates that the Senate, which is majority Democratic, will become even more majority Democratic, possibly up to 60 seats, but probably 56, 57 seats at a minimum.
Okay.
And of course, Barack Obama is leading in the presidency. One of the questions I have is that we had this remarkable situation where we had the House until 1994 was Democratic, and we had alternating presidencies. Then President Clinton had a split government. Then we had the all-Republican team between 2000 and 2006, split government 2006, 2008. And now it is, current polling indicates and is likely that we'll end up with the all-Democratic team. Most people who look at this are concerned about the term that they use as one-party rule, which is not really how it works, but that's the term that they use. And there's some anecdotal evidence that, for example, budget growth has been more moderated, expense growth is more moderated when the government is split. So since you're actually in charge,
Right.
how are you going to make sure that the errors that occurred in, say, 2000, I'm thinking of Mr. DeLay and his behavior, and those kinds of things, people that you saw them do, from your perspective, sort of really incorrect things. How are you going to make sure the same thing doesn't happen?
Oh, it won't. It won't happen. You have to. One of the things that I had to do when I became Speaker was to drain the swamp. The Washington Post, not by my description, but by the Washington Post description, described what was happening in the Capitol then as a criminal syndicate being operated out of Leader DeLay's office. Bad things were going on there, and that's one of the reasons that we won the election in 2006. It's interesting to hear Senator McCain talk about the dangerous, Obama, Reid, Pelosi, the dangerous. Dangerous really is not a word that should be part of a national debate as we go into a presidential race. But he's saying that they had no problem when they had the House, the Senate, and the White House for all those years, and majority on the Supreme Court. So they had it their way every place you turn, including the appointment of those judges. Now, all of a sudden, oh my gosh, we're going to have the House, the Senate, and the White House all Democratic. And what I say to that, Eric, is hold us accountable. Hold us accountable. The things that we've talked about, science, 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 and science, all those things, they're not political. They're not partisan issues. The things that we've talked about, they have no partisanship. This is what our country has to make a decision to do. And they have resisted it. Stem cell research, veto. That was in our 6-for-06, the first 100 hours we passed stem cell veto. It took us until now to get the production tax credits for wind, solar, and biofuels. All of that it took because they resisted, they resisted, they resisted. Thank you very much. And God bless you if you're the one who sneezed. And then so all of these things, have to hold us accountable. And all the things we did in the first 100 hours, raise the minimum wage and beyond, the biggest increase in veterans' benefits in the 77-year history of the Veterans Administration, passing the Competes Act, our innovation agenda. And by the way, here's a copy of it. You can go to www.housedemocrats.gov to get a copy of that. It's in writing. The innovation agenda, the Competes Act, whether it's the biggest package for college affordability since the GI Bill in 1944, another GI Bill for the Iraq and Afghan veterans, anything you can name, we did with big bipartisan votes in the House. We never could always get the 60 votes in the Senate, and that's why it's important for them to come closer so we don't have that stalemate again. But we weren't looking for a fight. We were looking for consensus on some of the things that we could do working together for the American people. Some of it the president signed, some of it he did not. We ended the war in Iraq probably 6 or 7 times with a time certain or a goal of beginning the redeployment now and being finished in a year, but couldn't get past the Senate, 60 votes in the Senate. Nobody wants to hear about that process piece of it, but that has been a real impediment to real change in our country. So the vote on Election Day, if I may be allowed a partisan moment, is to have a vote for real change, to take the country in a new direction, to make decisions that are common sense decisions about investments in science and rebuilding the infrastructure in America in a green way and creating all these new green jobs and making sure broadband is available to every American so all the advantages that you know better than anyone can liberate people from the situation that they are in. So it is, as I say, elect us, hold us accountable, make a judgment, and then go from there. But I do tell you that if the Democrats win and they have substantial majorities, Congress of the United States will be more bipartisan because the ideas that we're putting forth are very bipartisan in nature. And just think of what it'll be like, God willing, taking nothing for granted, working our hearts out. I'm relaxing now, but to elect Barack Obama President of the United States, a president of great intellect who understands ideas, who has great judgment based on values as well as knowledge, and with a strategy for success. Look only to his campaign to see his executive skills, and who has the gift of eloquence to bring the American people together, to unify our country. A great leader, vision, knowledge and judgment, strategy for success, ability to attract support and unify our country. It's going to be quite wonderful, but we can't take anything for granted. I know some of you may not share my view, and if you don't, here's what I suggest. Change your party. Take it back. Take it back from the radical right wing. Take it back from the radical right wing so it's the grand old party that was in the forefront of the environment and individual rights and so many great things, and building the infrastructure of America. Teddy Roosevelt, President Eisenhower. Take back your party because we need a dynamic Republican Party in our country.
Very well said. I have one more question, then I'd like to go to some questions from the audience. And our conversation so far has been quite notable because we have not talked at all about the war.
Yeah.
And we've still got men and women fighting for America in Iraq. What's going to happen in the next year, 2 years? And let's presume for purposes of argument that we have a President Obama. You as the speaker, of course.
Well, let's talk about the war for a second. In the context that we are in today, the context we're in today is our country is in a survival mode economically, just like any family would be when you have financial crises. What do we have to invest in? The education of our children. We need food. We need this. What can we do away with? One thing that we can no longer afford, in my view and in Anna's, if I may speak for Congresswoman Ashley, we could never afford was the war in Iraq. And it is time for us to say $12 billion a month. We can no longer afford that. And that's the minimal cost of that war. We can no longer afford that. So whether you want us to be there for 100 years or not, we can't afford it. It has taken us into recession by deepening our debt, and that fiscal impact has been dramatic. We can't afford it in terms of the loss of life, first and foremost, the loss of limb, tens of thousands of our troops injured, thousands and thousands of them permanently. We cannot afford it in terms of our reputation in the world, which has been greatly diminished, tremendous cost to our reputation. We cannot afford it in terms of the cost to our budget, over $1 trillion, and that's a modest estimate of it. And we cannot afford it in terms of how it has eroded, undermined the capability of our military to fight for our country wherever our interests are threatened. And so, God bless our men and women in uniform. They have served our country so magnificently. We are deeply in their debt. But this is a war that took our attention, our full attention away from Afghanistan, and now that situation has gotten worse. It is the biggest national security blunder probably in our country's history. And it must come to an end. And what I see under the presidency of Barack Obama is this is a very steady leader. Right, Eric? I mean, you know, if I may reference, very steady leader. A responsible, honorable, safe, and soon redeployment of our troops out of Iraq, timing to be determined by the conditions that the president sees, but to be completed soon. And that is part of actually the status of forces agreement that this administration is negotiating with the Iraqis too. It's not that much different. The Iraqis think it's time for us to go. So you will see that happening, and it probably will be completed by the time the next election happens. I don't mean 4 years, I mean in the 2-year election. But again, when we have a new president, he will establish the policy, we'll work together. But understand, this cost, let me just give you 2 examples. You be the judge. We passed a bill, bipartisan bill, strong bipartisan bill. It's called SCHIP, the State Children's Health Insurance Program. Strong bipartisan support, House and Senate. Under the bill, which was paid for with a tobacco tax, so it's because we're no new deficit spending, pay as you go, we're not insuring our kids to heap mountains of debt onto them. No new deficit spending. We passed the bill with strong bipartisan majorities. We sent it to the president. He vetoed the bill. He vetoed a bill that would have insured 10 million eligible children in the health program. If it were 1 million children, it would be staggering. 5 million children, oh wow. 10 million children, how remarkable. And why he vetoed the bill? He said, we can't afford it. We can't afford to insure our children, we the greatest country in the world, paid for by the tobacco tax. 40 days in Iraq, 40 days in Iraq, 10 million children in America insured for 1 year. The president said we couldn't afford it. Cancer. Do you know anybody who's not affected by cancer, their families or your friends or whatever? We spend on cancer research, well, let me say first, 550,000 people die in a year of cancer. 1,500 will today. Cancer research in our country, $5 billion, 2 weeks in Iraq. Much unfunded, promising science there for it. If suppose we spent 4 weeks in Iraq, $10, $11 billion on that research, how much healthier our country would be. It cost us almost over $200 billion, $250 billion for the healthcare cost, et cetera, of people with cancer. So even if you didn't care about the health aspects of it, just from a practical standpoint, $5 billion more would be a good investment. The president says if you put $1 more into the National Institutes of Health bill, and Anna Eshu's been a leader on this, I will veto the bill. We put it in, he vetoed it, we did, he did, and we couldn't override the veto. So these are not, as I say, partisan issues, but the cost of the war has prevented us from doing things that make our country healthier and make our country stronger. And now in this financial crisis, we can no longer afford it. Whatever your philosophy is about spreading democracy in the Middle East, this is a war we can no longer afford in any respect. Lives, limbs, reputation, dollars, and capability of our military to protect the American people. So that's what I think will happen, is that we will go into this next phase of honorable redeployment out of Iraq.
Well, thank goodness.
Yeah.
That's all.
We have all these beautiful things.
Let's get some questions. We have a question here on the left. Go ahead.
Sure.
Where are we going? Here?
Speaker Pelosi,
Yes.
thank you for coming to Google.
Thank you.
I've been listening to what you've said about the bailout bill, and I found it hard for myself to reconcile your words with reality. Specifically, you mentioned that those who voted against, they were just against any sort of regulation.
Some of them were, right.
And I wanted to bring your attention, or bring the audience attention, to the following comment by Brett Sherman, Democrat from California. Assets now held in China and London can be sold to US entities on Monday and sold to Treasury on Tuesday. Paulson has made it very clear he will recommend a veto of any bill that will contain a clear provision that said if Americans did not own the asset on September 20th, that it can't be sold to Treasury. Hundreds of billions of dollars are going to bail out foreign investors. They know it, they demanded it, and the bill has been carefully written that way to make sure that can happen. This was from the interview on CNBC.
Right.
All right? So the next comment, regarding...
Go ahead and ask your question.
Well, let me just respond to your question.
Sure.
No, there were plenty of Democrats who didn't vote for the bill because they didn't like the bill. But what I'm saying to you is why the Republicans couldn't get their 100 votes is that they didn't have 100 people on their side who would vote for an intervention. So it's larger than the specifics of the bill. It's about the principle of should there be a government intervention. And a good number of them have a great deal of unrest with the government purchasing this stake in these banks because it looks like a move to nationalization of banks, which none of us wants.
Sure.
But it looks that way. So I was referring to, your point is excellently taken, and I agree with you. There are many other reasons people didn't vote for it. But I was just addressing the Republican, they had the President of the United States, their candidate for president, all of the Republican leadership asking them to vote for it, and they just said it's not their philosophy. And in their speeches, if you look up their speeches, which Google enables you to do, you can hear them say, we spread democracy, we're for free people and free markets. And while if this bill goes down, it will be painful. We will suffer pain, but we will be free. Because with all due respect, that's their political philosophy of no intervention. It's beyond laissez-faire, it's beyond Adam Smith. And that's what I was referencing. No, there are plenty of reasons why other people were unhappy with the bill, and that's why the oversight piece of it is to make sure that the taxpayer is protected in all of this is so important.
Sure, and just a second comment and then a question or a quote.
That's
This from Joe Nocera of New York Times, October 24th, right?
Yes, he just wrote that, right?
Right. $25 billion, this is words by executive of JP Morgan, who received $25 billion, will help us to do perhaps a little bit more active on the acquisition side. I'm skipping a bit. And I think we're going to be some great opportunities for us to grow in this environment through acquisition, to grow their business.
Again, can you just ask
Yeah,
your
no, it's
question?
a good point.
And not lend anything.
Yeah.
What is your
Here's
question?
the point.
No,
Last
no,
Friday, this is a very important point that the gentleman has made. Last Friday, not this one 3 days ago, but a week ago, there was a big article in Wall Street Journal, New York Times, one of them, that said that Merrill Lynch had said they were going to keep their, did I mention this earlier? Forgive me if I did. That they were going to keep, I'll just reference it briefly, that they were going to keep their $25 billion. Now, this is found money. They didn't have it 3 days before. In fact, the administration didn't even believe in doing it 3 days before. Now they have $25 billion, and they were going to hold it until the next quarter. And I called Hank. I said, Hank, this was not the intention, but I told you that already. He put out a very strong statement on Monday to say that, while they had to make their decisions in a free market that the purpose of this money was to put money into circulation and to lend. And that's what I said earlier, banks lend, that's their business. And they should be lending to other banks and community banks, smaller banks.
And they're saying they will tighten the credit, they will sit on that money and just buy
well, that's,
assets at fire sale prices.
They have to come back. They have 250, then 100 that the president can certify, then the other 350 they have to come back to Congress. So I think that performance will be viewed.
Let's move to our next question. Yes.
But those are very important points that the gentleman brings up.
Speaker Pelosi, thank you for coming here, and
My
thank you for
pleasure.
the service
Thank
to our country. I love this country, and I know you do as well. And there's been a history in this country of, because we're a democracy, there tends to be the majority takes advantage of the minority. We've seen it throughout the history of the country, and no good has ever come from it, whether it be slavery, religious rights, gay rights, it goes on and on. We've had bad issues in our country's history. And I'm seeing the specter of this coming up again, except, as always, there's a justification. And in this case, it's the rich can afford it. That it's okay for 95% to take advantage of 5% by forcing them to pay incredibly high tax rates while the vast majority pay very little. I believe approximately, you'd know the numbers better than I do, 3% of the country probably pays close to 50% of all the taxes. Now that seems neither fair nor just, but yet there's always a reason why that's acceptable in this country. Do you believe that that is fair, just, and reasonable?
Let me tell you why. For the past number of years during the Bush administration, the top 1 or 2% in our country have been greatly advantaged by special tax breaks for them. And in the course of that time, it is my view, and this is the national debate, so your question I welcome and is a great one in my view. For the past few years, this top 1, 2, 3% has extracted money from the middle class. This is all going the other way, at the expense of the middle class. And those tax cuts for the wealthiest people in our country, and wealthy to over 250, however it is defined, wealthier than most people, than 95% of the people in our country, have been the biggest contributor to the budget deficit. And don't take it from me, that's what the Republican Congressional Budget Office said all during, until we took over and turned it and said we're going to have fiscal responsibility, no new deficit spending. And part of our plan was to remove that special tax break for the top 1, 2, 3%. It is important to recognize and salute success and achievement, and the creation of wealth is important for our economy. The creation that helps create jobs, it helps create opportunity for people. But there has to be some sense of fairness. And the fact is that if you give a tax cut, instead of giving a bigger tax cut to people making over 250, you give a tax cut to 95% of the American people. You inject demand into the economy, you create jobs, you inject demand into the economy, and you have a fairer system where many more people participate in the economic prosperity of our country. The fact is that wealth has been distributed up to the wealthiest people in our country at the expense of the middle class. Let's just make it a lot fairer, where they still get their tax cuts. It's the same tax cuts that the middle class gets. The people at the high end will get the same tax cuts as the middle class does. It's a philosophical difference, but it is one that has an impact on the fiscal soundness of our country in a very significant way. And it is one that leaves the middle class behind and all those who aspire to the middle class. So that's the discussion that is going on there. It's about fairness. These tax cuts are only a few years old. They are a product of the Bush administration, and they are a subject of review in the next Congress and in the next, under the next president.
Our next question, thank you.
Speaker Pelosi, thank you for coming. It was really quite a privilege to have you here today.
It was my pleasure, thank you.
But I was really disappointed that in June you led the House in passing the FISA legislation, which was billed as a compromise, but granted retroactive immunity to telecom firms for their illegal warrantless wiretapping of ordinary Americans. Now, many of these same firms have actually given generously to your campaign in this year and also in years past. And with a stronger majority in 2009, will you revisit the issue of telecom immunity and stand up for the constitutional rights of your constituents?
It's a very, very important question. Congresswoman Eshoo is a leader on the Intelligence Committee. I should probably defer to her for part of this question because she was very, very unhappy about that FISA legislation, as was I. I have served on Intelligence Committee longer than anyone in the Congress. It's one of my forging experience in the Congress, and as Speaker, I'm still ex officio member of the committee. I didn't like that legislation at all, but the fact is that we had, and I think it's important to note this, it doesn't make you any happier about it, but there were about 6 things that were in the bill that really did undermine our Constitution. In fact, one of them was called inherent authority. The White House was contending that the president had inherent authority under the Constitution to collect surveillance that could surveil anybody in our country, this one man, without any judicial review or anything like that. I said, but we can never put forth a bill that would have that. It disregarded the rights of Americans overseas. It had a number of provisions in it that, again, seriously undermined the Constitution. A little more complicated to go into, but they were all, I said they all have to come out. Now, the one thing that did not come out of this bill that the Senate sent us, the one thing that did not come out was the retroactive immunity for the telecom companies. I've told them, don't have them send me any contributions. I think that they have come out of this very tainted. But it isn't about contributions. I mean, I understand why you might think that, but this is about the United States Senate sending us a bill. We in the House sent them a bill that honored the Constitution, that didn't have retroactive immunity. They sent us a bill that turned it upside down with all these provisions that gave the president, and whether the president is Barack Obama or John McCain or George W. Bush, no president should have that inherent authority, Democrat, Republican, whatever. And so, but they took our bill, turned it upside down, put all these other things in it, and then the retroactive immunity. I honestly believe that whatever it is we want to find out about these companies, it's not really about them, it's about the Bush administration. And we have strong language in the bill for an inspector general and the courts to look into what they were doing. And again, I'm not happy about it, but it's the bill that we had to have. Now, intelligence plays a very important role in the protection of the American people. And it was bottom line, push come to shove, agreed that we had to have the bill. Barack Obama voted for the bill. There's reasons why people voted for it that have to do with the protection of the American people. I was very unhappy with the Senate. Frankly, I was very unhappy with the Democrats in the Senate, because if they hadn't voted for it, they wouldn't have gotten the 60 votes to take up their version of the bill. And so I agree with you. We can try to make changes in it. I really don't think that the retroactive piece of it and the immunity was going to tell us much more than we would learn from the Inspector General.
We've sort of run out of time.
But you're right. It's something to be unhappy about. There's just no question.
My general comment is, remember that the Speaker has to work in the context of the negotiations with the Senate to produce these bills. Let's go ahead, York.
And the Democrats in the Senate abandoned us on this. That was really very disappointing, because if they didn't get 60 votes, they couldn't have taken up that bill. So it was a bipartisan problem.
Go ahead.
Barack Obama wasn't one of those 60 votes. He was not one of those 60 votes. But later, when the compromise package came back, he did support that.
So thanks again for coming here, and I do hope you make a habit of visiting us if at all possible. One of the few times that I don't think I've ever been more ashamed to be an American as when I found out that we had probably tortured people who were suspected terrorists, or that we were wiretapping our own citizens in violation of the Fourth Amendment. Would you agree that those actions were against the Constitution? And if so, why do you feel that the impeachment of George W. Bush was off the table?
Well, I don't know that they are. We all agree that the torture, the Guantanamo, Abu Ghraib, all of those things were not about American values, and they undermined our reputation in the world. But more importantly, our reputation to ourselves as to who we are as a country. Whether doing those were an impeachable offense is another story, and it was not thought that they were. The spying on the American people again, we stopped that by passing the bill that said you do not act upon this inherent authority. And in fact, they had stopped it when they came to Congress and they said to some of us, will you agree that we can continue this? We said no. They had to stop, and that's why the legislation came forth. And then we stopped the inherent authority in that. But I know that there are a lot of people in the country who believe that President Bush should be impeached. I told them that the other day. As a matter of fact, I didn't say it quite that way. What I said was, you should hear the arguments that are being used against me in my campaign, and that being one of them. But in any event, it's a very serious matter, the impeachment of a president, and what it does to the country. It tears the country apart. If you believe that the president has violated the Constitution, you have no choice but to move forward on that. But to do it on the prospect that he might have and divide the country in that way is a big chance for our country. I don't want them taking those kinds of, I thought they were completely wrong what they did to President Clinton. I don't want them doing that. I don't think we should just do that to presidents because we don't like what they did. And I certainly don't like what President Bush did. I can't think of anything almost. But the fact is that there's a big cost to an impeachment unless you really have unimpeachable evidence that the president should be impeached.
So we've run way over. I'd like to just have one last question. I apologize to the other questioners. We'll have to deal with you in some other way. Go ahead, yes, sir.
With all due respect to the intent of the stimulus package, don't you think that it will be spent to a large extent on consumption and bring us more into debt that is financed by other nations? And how can we, in general, break with the habit of consumption that is financed by others?
I think that your point is a good point. I think that the American people got a dose of, all of us, whether it's heads of banks or heads of households, got a dose of cold water thrown in our face in the past couple of months, 6 weeks, whatever it is. And whether it's about home ownership, whether it's about the stock market going down, whether it's about the credit crunch, whether it's about the bond market, whatever it is, I think people will probably not be the consumers that they used to be, and that as we come out of this, God willing soon, that people will be more, anyway, this is what the economists tell me as recently as this morning, that people will be more inclined to save than to consume, and that's a good thing for our country, although we need consumer confidence for people to also, buy homes, durable goods, cars, whatever else it happens to be. So, but there'll be a different calibration, I think, in decision making on the part of families. So when you talk about our stimulus package we're talking about now, we're talking about investments in jobs, in job creation, good paying jobs in our country, green collar jobs, many of which are blue collar jobs. So it's about that. And it's about helping people who are out of work. We have the unemployment insurance, helping states with health care needs that they will have of these now many more unemployed children and seniors of those families. And it's about those kinds of things. Whether we go to the next step to do a rebate as we did last year, I think we'd probably more likely go into the direction of a permanent tax cut than a rebate, so that people have predictability. They don't have a check, or I'll go out and spend it. They have predictability about how they do their budget on the ongoing. But your point is well taken. If people just consume and not save, that's not a good thing. So it all has to be calibrated. So when we figure on the amount for the fiscal package, it has to be, I read, Goldman Sachs put out a report this morning that said we needed a stimulus package of $500 billion, $500 billion. Takes your breath away. Well, it's less than they spent on the rescue package. And people are saying you need 2-3% of GDP, which would be around 300 billion, something like that. Well, I have to see what they say about what we need to jolt the economy, but I also have to make sure that that jolt doesn't take us deeper into debt, because all you want to do in a counter-cyclical way to invest and create jobs can be undermined if you take the country deeper into debt. So there's a calibration that has to be there, just as there's calibration in every household across America about how they make their financial decisions in spending and saving. But it's all related to the health of our economy, because we must have consumer confidence if we're going to ever restore confidence in the markets. And just all of the connected issues, the housing issue, the credit issue for small businesses, which are the lifeblood of our economy. And without small businesses, they could not grow to be Google. So it's about the future. But your question is a fair one. And again, it's the balance that you have to have. It isn't, let's spend all this money because this is what the economy needs, without realizing the impact of taking us deeper into debt will be. So understand what we are, and our mantra in the Democratic Party is no new deficit spending, pay as you go. When you are in a recession, you have to make certain investments, but you have to not go overboard, because that can make matters worse. Anyway, I thank you so much for the opportunity to share some views with you. Whether we agree or not, I'm very impressed that you have such great interest. I'm going to yield back to you.
I think for the last 70 minutes, you've seen why we are so well represented in Washington. Congresswoman Issue, Nancy, Madam Speaker now, you can see the thoughtfulness, the sophistication, the global view, the principle of law, the respect for individual rights, and all the values that I think a lot of us care about. It is a delight to have you literally running the government.
Don't forget science, 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 and science.
So thank you all, and get out and vote.
Thanks, Eric.
Thank you.